Welcome to the official releasing of the Soccer Sim beta, and I would like to thank everybody for making time to come and do this presentation. And I would like to introduce you to our team lead, Mike Canty, and our couple members of all sides, Brandon Toll, Kyle Joyner, and myself, Chris. And I'm going to go over a couple of technologies and frameworks that we use. We use Visual Studio 2010 to develop this application, and we use Silverlight 4.0 to develop it. And we use the Silverlight business application as our template, and we use C# as a language of choice. And to do our data transaction, we use WCF Real Services with Link. And to handle our source control, we use Tortoise SVN.
We also use Ankh SVN to Visual Studio's add-on for SVN features.
And before we go to the actual application, I'm going to go over a couple of features that it has. You'll be able to create a team. You'll be able to simulate matches. You'll be able to manage players, set tactics, and display stats, and switch some members. And now we're going to show Kyle's going to go over the home page.
Okay, so Soccer Sim is a simulation of soccer. So basically, you get to act as a coach or a manager of soccer swim. You get to choose your players, you get to train your players, you get to manage your players, and play against other teams. We hosted the app, so it's not going to be, we published it. So here we go. Here's the first thing you see when you first launch it up. It'll show all the top teams, latest highlights, and the total registered users. So you can go ahead and log in if you want. All right. Kyle's got a team going, and players say that, you know, one of his players is being rowdy. We're gonna fire him. So,
all right, so this is our player view. This is where you change positions, fire and hire players. And I laid out this page with the intent of making it as simple as possible and utilizing what we have. There's no buttons, there's no combo boxes. To fire a player, you drag them from one grid to the next, and then they're off your team. And same thing with free agents. If you want to hire a player, you drag them from free agents to your team. Always get the highest skill. And this will deduct their amount from your funds computer. So my funds just dropped. You cannot have, one of our business rules is you can't have more than 20 players, you can't have less than 14. So now that I have 20, it will not let me drag and drop anything else. I have a full roster. Same if I go down below 14. If I hit 14, it will not let me fire anybody else. I have to have 14. And to change that player's position, I just click here and I get a combo box, change them to goalkeeper, and they're changed. And that's the same with all of these. Any position that I click on, or any player, will change that position. And that's the functionality of the player view. It simply handles who's on your team, what position they're in.
And the best feature I think about this is
This was something I put in just to show the power of Silverlight. We actually left it in. It's like one line. You can completely flip the grid around.
and you can still
Which amazed us
order
at first.
stuff.
Yeah, you can still sort, you can still do everything you need. Gotta click on this. Okay, so.
Okay, so we're gonna go to team view. This is where a lot of your team management comes in play.
And notice that with each page that we navigate to, there is a voting, there's a progress.
Yeah, all this is Telerik except for the charts. We left the default, so we'll let charts in.
Okay, so there's your list of players, and for each player, it has a training chart that shows what they're training throughout their career.
Yeah, so training costs $200. If they're green, then that means they're training right now. So you can see the training that took place over the point of one day. It's actually backwards. So they're that efficient, they train backwards. But if you try to train a player that's already training, it's going to say, this player is still training for another 9 hours. Until you can grab some beer. Or you can try another player that's not training, and you select what you want to increase about that player. So I'm going to do shot power, click OK, and they will now be training shot power.
So it'll show your, all your attributes, and it takes a day for your training to happen. So whenever you log in and your training is finished, it will automatically update. Let's see, it'll show your team stats and your next opponents. And then you have tactics here for your next match. So we have a formation, aggression, type of play, and bonus. And your formation is the amount of defenders, midfielders, and forwards that you have, respectively. Your aggression, you can either play really harsh and gather a lot of flags, or you can play calm. Type of play you can do offensively or defensively, or you can do balanced play. And your bonus is basically saying, hey guys, if you win, I'll give you some money. So, and then we have another feature that we didn't necessarily implement. It was out of our scope. Playmaker.
All right, so what we have here is my team is Goal Killers franchise from the ETL, playing Brass Monkeys, which is actually Brandon's team. And I've got my tactics set up, so we are ready to throw down. So we're going to go ahead and click View Match. And I've got a child window that's going to pop up, it's going to count down, and things are going to get kicked off. And this is the actual simulation part.
So like right here, you have the ball is, you pass it to your teammates, and it gets stolen by the defender. The blue dots are the home team, which is Goal Killers, and the red dots is Brass Monkeys. You can see the team names in the top left, and also you have a stadium name that changes depending on which the home team is. And above game speed right there, you have a progress bar. So if you were to change the slider to make it go faster, you can see the progress bar. It fills up faster. And you can make it go really slow if you just like watching soccer simulations all day.
All day, like 3 hours.
And there's actually some logic behind this. It's not just like randomization.
So what it does, it pretty much takes the player's position and takes the skill level and attributes of each player and match it up to the defender of that in that matchup. And pretty much if you have a greater skill level, like what Kyle has, he has a lot better skills. His players has a lot better skills than what Brandon has. So therefore, his players have a greater percentage of passing the ball along forward. But Brandon still has a chance of defending that ball, but it's a lesser chance based on all the skill level. And
Just a side note, you can see the formation right here. There's 4, 4, 2, and then going the opposite way, this is 4, 3, 3.
And we also for the simulation, we had to validate our data. for our simulation. So we actually found an average number of passes per game, and we pretty much tweaked it so you'll have that's around that average of passes for that game. Also, we also found that it's like 1/4 of every attempt on the goalie, one shot is made, so we made sure it passed that validation. And if you have, let's say, 4-4-2 and it gets 3-3, like 4-4-2 versus 3-3-4, there's always going to be 1 versus 2. So you got 2 defenders versus 1, so it's pretty much the same thing. And of course, if you have like ridiculous amount of stats or ridiculous amount of difference between like the attacker stats and the defender stats, you always have like a 5% chance of defending, no matter how great of a difference there is. So as you can see, even though Kyle does have a greater, his team has greater skill levels, Brandon still can score. And we're just gonna finish this up real quickly. And there is yellow cards for fouls. It's just real slim chance, like 1% chance of actually getting a yellow card.
Also, there's like a hidden feature we found that if you actually close out this window, the simulation will still run and it'll still show you who's winner. So apparently go through and beating that bottom one. So close out this.
So what we did for the, we have a rule that says you get to play 1 match every 24 hours. So typically, I just played that match, it would save it, we would be done, but actually if you go back to it, it's going to replay that match. The reason we did that is for the demo, we want to be able to show you, if we wanted to show you the match again, we will play it again. So in this case, we didn't save the match data. This is the only other match that I have saved against Starbrights. And but this is hosted. You guys can go to that IP, make an account, and play. And we're wanting to implement some type of playoff system, some type of league where you actually have a champion at the end of a few weeks or something like that. But that's the functionality of the team, is to play the match, see your opponents, and things like that. Brandon did the about page, and well, let's talk about that.
So yeah, so you know your standard about page, it tells you more about the project, who our client was, and our email. But we also have a comment thing that you put in the comment and you submit it, and it's usually sends an email except when it's hosted on the Southeastern network. So it must be the same ports block, but it'll give you like a customized pop-up window that just says that you can't email. So. But everywhere else you can email except Southeastern.
So we also have the standard create users. And we have with the metadata from the domain service, it actually validates all of this stuff, and it'll tell you what's wrong if there is something wrong with your password. And I think it requires 1 special character.
And if you do forget your password, you can always go back to that question that you said and we can answer it again and let you through.
And it comes up, tells you to create a team, create your home stadium. And when you go to players, you will not have any players. So what it does is it gives you players. It gives you players. It was there. It gives you players. So it assigns you 14 players and default positions. You would drag over and begin making your team, setting your positions, things like that. and your money and everything, your total skill level, all that's being calculated. Drag and drop does not like trackpads. So, unit testing, we'll go to the actual app. So this is the hosted version. In Visual Studio, we have our solution. RIA Services thankfully sets up a lot of this for you. But it sets up in a way where you have to spend like 3 weeks getting used to what it's done for you. It generates a lot of code, which a lot of that we had to move and modify. The default databases, everything is local, so we had to move that, change connection strings, and it took us a few weeks to figure out what it gives you out of the box. So it was good in the fact that it set everything up for you. It was bad in the implementation, I guess, that we were getting.
That's the reason being it's in version 1, so they really haven't had time to weed out the bad features of it.
Yeah, the blogs are just full of promises. Like,
Yeah.
oh, for the next version.
This will be version 2.
So I recommend if you're using anything, wait till version 3.
Yeah.
But it does give you this default template for unit test, which was really cool. We enjoyed working with this a lot. We were going to pass it off as something we made, but somebody in here is bound to use it before they know already. So it pops up with this nice UI, gives you this countdown, and says, all right, in 5 seconds, we're going to run your test. And until that time, if you click, it'll stop the counter and then let you do anything you want. So we have 12 tests that are basically just testing collections, and they all passed.
We also have a couple that check our data in the model, and they make sure that all of our algorithms are actually calculating the values that we're expecting. So we're just asserting values and making sure that they equal up to what we expect to get from the actual algorithm that we implemented with the simulation.
But for the code structure, I guess we can show you a little bit of that. We're using an ADO Unity model. It looks kind of like Link, but it's kind of cooler than Link. It lets you do some fun stuff with that. That's connecting to our DB. And then we have a services layer that is our domain service. This is where RIA takes place. And it's got our different queries, inserts, updates, deletes, things like that. And all that comes up through the web project into the actual Silverlight project, and that's where we access in our views and models and things like that, view models. That's where we access the service layer, pull our data. This project for me was particularly fun. It's the first project where I really didn't use regions. And after thinking about that, I thought, well, why do we use regions? It's to hide code that we don't necessarily want to look at anymore. And I didn't have any of that. So I was pretty happy about that. The unit testing, we could have implemented that more. We could have tested everything. That's something we started at midterms, prototypes. We started unit testing, so we didn't really start on that early enough. But if you're coming to the .NET meeting tonight, I'm going to be breaking this app apart. Me and Mike, we're going to go through the whole thing. We're going to be going over the whole RIA Services platform and what it does.
All right, guys. If I wanted you guys to make a Windows Phone implementation of this, which also does Silverlight, how would you guys go about splitting out the logic for all the domain and stuff? All the processing and...
Very good question.
That page is too big, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it is.
So what I would have liked to see is, you guys have at the bottom of the web, right, which is where it's hosted. Then you guys have the top project, which is the Silverlight project, as I see by the main page.xaml, correct?
Yes.
Then another project would be the domain, which are your algorithms, your things that are not related to the UI, which could then be reused, draw a smaller UI,
Okay.
and issue it out to a phone. Also, if you want to do just a web-based implementation without Silverlight, or you want to change it to anything else, you can reuse the domain objects.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm glad to see you guys doing unit testing. It's good.
You had a group of free agents that you drew players from and you fired players back into. Is that a shared pool? Is that a shared resource that all the users use?
Right.
So did you consider the problem of making it thread safe? I mean, you've got multiple people using this thing possibly at the same time. what happens if two people try to hire the same player at the same time?
Well, I believe it takes your ID and then goes in and retrieves 30 that are random to
Yeah.
you. We
Random.
tried that.
Yes.
We pulled different players.
It's a random pool, but I mean, it comes from all the same pools, but they're a random selection based on your username.
Well, but what I mean is, you've got a pool of free agents, right?
Right.
And it's the same pool of free agents for all users, right?
Right.
So if a particular free agent is chosen by user A, and user B happens to be choosing players at the same time, and tries to choose the same player, what happens?
Well, we've come across that problem, but the way that we fixed it is, instead of loading a random 30 select players for the same user, we base it off of your user account. And we actually randomize based on like your user is the actual seed that we use to randomize.
Okay, I'm not talking about picking the group of players. I'm talking about when you're dragging and dropping a particular player from the pool to your team.
Right.
But once
I don't know whether
those
that's
random
to do
players,
with-
once those 30 or those groups that are up there, the same ones aren't gonna come up.
Yeah, I don't think
It's
two
not the
users can
same.
have the
Yeah.
same pool at the same
No,
time.
they're not gonna have the same.
Oh,
pool.
so they don't all use the same pool?
Well, they do.
grab from
A
the same
subset of
pool,
the
but
pool.
if you have, you
I know it's
logged in,
confusing.
another person logged in, y'all gonna have two separate pools.
Because it only pulls, maybe I didn't show that, it only pulls 30, it doesn't pull the whole list. There's actually, I think close to 15,000 free agents.
Yeah.
So each player that's playing, each user is using a disjoint set of,
Customized to their team ID.
a disjoint pool of players that they can choose from.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
They
actually,
essentially get it from the same.
yeah, it's from the same big pool, but unit testing helped us catch a pretty big error. It's easy to grab the wrong query out here. One of these is get players, the get players query, which returns all 15,000 players. And one of our unit tests was to check to see the count should not be any more than 30, and it was. And we realized we had grabbed the wrong query. It was one query off, so we were pulling all 15,000 at one time, which, as you can imagine, pretty much killed the load times.
One other question, I may have missed it right at the very beginning of your presentation, but did you have a client for this project?
Yes.
It was
Dr.
Clark.
Oh, okay.
Can the client ask a question now?
Yeah.
So yeah, I like the fact that your scoring system seems to be more based in reality than 15,000 to 1, like I think when we started. And I guess as a client who's going to try to grade you for a simulation project, the main thing I'm interested in is are the parameters you chose for that simulation realistic? And my question is there some admin screen to tinker with those values, or are they all just hard-coded somewhere in some file?
We will give you something to tinker with.
Yeah, we're going to continue this over break for
Okay.
just not the actual app, just the actual simulation part.
It's a good way out to avoid the answer, but his answer was, did you?
No, not right now, no.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was.
They have a menu where you set your tactics. As
And
far
my-
as what those mean, that's not changing.
Okay, I guess a follow-up to that is, the way you got it to be a realistic score, it's easy to cheat, like we talked about in class, it's easy to cheat in simulation, and kind of just tinker one variable and like, oh look, it's the output I like, but that variable itself may be unrealistic. For example, you may, just really crank down the probability of scoring until it gets to something realistic.
Right.
So I guess,
Break the data.
yeah, so I guess,
Using the data that I found, the probability of scoring is 1/4 out of all the
Uh-huh.
attempts. So we pretty much based
so
on
that's
that.
fixed, you flip
Yeah,
it
we
back.
actually got pretty lucky and we didn't have to tweak. Like we didn't,
Okay.
like have to actually refactor a lot of our things that many times because the shots were around, in the same ballpark as the data, and so were the goals on like shots attempted and actually made. So we didn't have to really tweak.
Good. Okay.
Couple questions about training. Can training fail? And will training be the same for each player no matter what? Like, say you increment by X amount, is each player going to increment by the same amount every time they train?
That's a good question. Actually, it is a percentage of 1, 2, or 3. They can increment either their attribute or their skill level by 1, 2, or 3. The percentage is 85%. up by 1, and 15% up by 2, and 5%.
So it's not possible for them to just be like, oh, something screwed up and he got no training at all for this, or it was a complete failure.
Right.
So there's no.
There's no failure.
Well, you run out of money.
You will. That's why you play matches, and each match that you play, if you win a match, then you gain a certain amount of money. If you lose, you get like $200, I guess the currency is, and if you tie, then you get like 300 each.
Did you consider changing strategy, like in the middle of the simulation? Like say you're losing and you say, well, maybe I need to change strategy.
That was something we talked about.
That's
Like halftime or something?
Yeah,
we
in halftime, we could adjust if you're losing. Yeah.
Might be something good, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be that hard.
In your project, mention a lot of the technologies. Can you tell me about inside your coding, your GUI interface? I see you are turning around, so a lot of things is happening. Can you tell me about those technology you are using and point to like something, link where
And give
you
examples.
use it?
Yeah, well, all of the flip around and things like that, that's all Silverlight. Silverlight 4 has all that. The rotating menu is on like an x-axis, I think it is. But,
And the data grid, we're using color controls.
yeah.
And pretty much, he showed you the domain where you're using WCF for your services for the data transaction between the client and the database.
Yeah, but the flip around menus, it's like one line. Silverlight gives you you adjust the axis, and I just set it to a slider value. And we're using a base iNotify change that pretty much everything. I think it's everything inherits off that base notify change. So any properties that change all inherit from the same class. We have a ton of properties, especially for the simulation. Everything is going insane. And one of the cool things we got to do was a visibility converter, so we could bind visibility to different players who has the ball, just a Boolean value if they have the ball or not.
These are I-value converters?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
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 Did you consider, I know you're not supposed to be doing a commercial project right now, and obviously you didn't include anything, but did you consider any ways that you might expand this project and monetize it?
No, we haven't considered it. I'm not sure, honestly. Can you elaborate on?
Well, how could, I mean, it's already an online service. It's already an online service. How could you make money from this?
We haven't really
How
thought
could your
about
client
that,
make money from it?
like a first glance look, I would say offer more like in-depth sets for
Yeah, I mean, you can always add advertising from different things.
like Google advertisements. But, I mean, those are the first two that come to mind, but I haven't really thought about or buying, yeah. Buying one.
I'll be off base. Kyle, did I see you last year?
Yeah, I'm not in this class.
Yeah.
I took 411 last year, and these guys had an awesome idea, and I've been wanting to learn RIA services. So I hopped in it, and it's actually doubling as our project for 443, which I am in. So we had a lot of fun with this. We
With the
estimated
same
that we
client,
spent-
because the client, you didn't mention that he is the teacher.
Yeah, he's the teacher for 443. We estimated, or we probably spent at minimum 280 hours on this, and it really shouldn't have took any longer than I would say 150.
So what's your point?
So our
Spending
point is
280 hours,
I've
I don't see
learned
the point.
everything.
that RIA services was a pain in the beginning. We had to do a lot of non-coding research, which was not fun.
Well, that's how everything is, right? So when I came out, this didn't exist. So who's going to teach this?
and especially when this came out, this is the first version, a lot of stuff is not out.
So who bought the A-Press book for RIA services?
We resorted to Google.
There
Right.
wasn't a lot of information on Google.
There wasn't. Every tutorial, they take this data grid and they take a service and they bind
Yeah.
data to it. It's great, but that's all they show you. That's
Yeah.
the only tutorial you
gotta
get.
do.
Yeah.
So the way we learn, we buy books. A lot of companies buy books for you, right? You guys over at Invoke, you just ask for a book and it magically appears on your desk in about a week.
That's about it.
They're about $50 a piece, so for students, I can understand it. You don't want to pay for them, right? But these books are good. A-Press has some good books. You get digital versions, you can do a lot of stuff. They run you beginning to end. A lot of Microsoft technologies and other technologies, you want to know about the guys on the Silverlight or SharePoint, they're generally the people who wrote it. They were orange badges at Microsoft who did it. So these guys actually do know how to use all the internals. And they explain it to you, run you through tutorials. It's the fastest way to learn a new technology. Once you get into the working world, start requesting your employer to buy you a book. And if they balk at the $50, tell them exactly how long your estimate's going to be over. And at $100 an hour, it's going to cost you a little bit more. But books are really good. Books are really the best way to learn about it. You can watch videos online, it may make you feel better by the end of the day. You may learn how to spin a grid, but you're not going to learn how to really use it. A lot of these technologies, I hear a lot of students say, well, Subversion sucks. It lost my repository. No, you misused it, because the entire world uses Subversion. And it's only the inexperienced that have problems with it. It's like saying using a computer sucks because I don't know how to type. Right? RIA services accelerate a lot of production applications. The fact that you guys didn't know how to use it up front, that's the rest of your life, you know? Right?
Yeah, once we began to get the hang of it, really took off. After about prototype,
So another thing we do is we go through tutorials and we write spikes. Right? Spike is something short, it's ugly code, figure out how to implement it. Then we go and write clean code now that we understand the technology. We don't try to do the same, we don't try to do both at the same time. What was the most difficult thing you encountered, Chris?
Trying to figure out how to do the simulation. Trying to get all the formations and all the algorithms matching up and validate to the data that I got, and just pretty much putting all that together and making it all the matchups,
Yeah.
and getting all that.
Back to what Dr. Collada said, I had a professor at UNO despised software developers and computer scientists because he said our approach to solving a problem is if the algorithm was supposed to put out 14 and it actually only put out 10, a computer science developer is going to add 4 rather than fix the algorithm, right?
Yeah.
He calls it throwing darts. When you're in simulations, don't throw darts.
And
Don't try to error correct to make things right, because you're going to start tweaking and tweaking and tweaking and tweaking and tweaking until it looks right. But when somebody changes the seed base, you're totally off.
And as Brandon mentioned, we made sure the output is what we wanted, so we made sure that was unit tested. So we know the algorithms work the way we wanted to.
All right, next. Brandon, what was your difficult part?
Data context. Like, we were just trying to pull an individual value from the database and match it to something else, see like if they were equal to each other or something. Because like, every time we would try to get a data context, and then we would run through our code and it would be empty. So we changed load operations, and actually we implemented it in different ways. Like me and Mike figured out a way, and they showed me how to use it, so I used his, and then Kyle figured out actually a better way to load and burn data context actually.
Well, we had this really stupid idea. It was a very stupid idea. We were using
Good at the moment.
like 4 data contexts throughout the whole class, and we would new up 4, name will be something else, fill it with data, and use it the entire time. And it turned out to burn us. And we got to talk with Brian. He said, no, they're supposed to be short-lived objects. So now, like every single thing we do in with data context, we'll initialize it, do what we need to do, close it, and we're done. So we started using them on short-lived. We actually, before we did that, we actually had a worse idea, was to make like 4 static that the whole app uses. In front of
Everybody does that once.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't do that.
We thought about it. Yeah.
We didn't do it.
We thought it was a good idea, you know.
You guys are using Unity Framework? Is that what you guys are using?
Yeah, I think Link is allowed, or you can hook up a service, but we just use Unity Framework.
I have a question for each of you to answer. After doing this project, what skill or perhaps a piece of technology did you decide you really needed to know more about? And after this project's over, what would you do to try to gain that skill or knowledge?
Silverlight.
I'd say Silverlight, I would say database interaction. Database interaction.
Database interaction.
You know, in our previous classes, we kind of like toiled with it and fooled with it, but we didn't have like a database like enterprise, and we were using pretty much will be a widely used service, WCF, and I think that's what I got out of it.
So what's your plan to learn more about that missing skill in your toolbox?
More projects like this.
Look,
Okay, Grant?
I would say organization. Going into this, we weren't as organized as we were after the prototype. So we got a lot more done after the prototype, just because everybody knew what we were working on, and we did a lot of pair programming too, so that helped out a lot. And the organization was the biggest thing I learned.
No, I'm asking what you learned that you really need more of, that you need to know more about, and how do you plan to get that knowledge in the future?
Organization was mine, like,
So you still need to learn more about organization.
well, yeah, I mean,
Okay.
like more to follow the agile development practice.
Okay. And so what's your plan?
Work with teams who want to practice that, and have peers that know agile or have or hopefully have managers teach and have that same structure that agile development does.
Mine, Silverlight. I mean, as somebody mentioned before, is using Windows 7 phones now, and that's definitely that's really gonna be useful in the future, definitely. That was my big thing, and of course, learning how I can further that learning is learning how to develop app using Silverlight.
Mine would be the service layer, working more with services. RIA was fun to learn. I would like to go back and completely remake this in WCF just to see how it works. That's, I don't think they would do it with me, but that would be working with the service layer. Would be something I'd be interested in.
So how do you think you're going to get that knowledge?
Do more projects that can rely on services instead of just doing data interaction. Don't use services. Typically, that's what we do. We use stuff that doesn't use services because they're a headache. But I think they're pretty big. I mean, they're widely used, that's for sure. But this actually has, I forgot to mention, this is out of the box too. This gives you the option to install on a local machine, which is pretty cool. You'll download it and will run in a windowed mode, like just an application. And I'm assuming it still gets its data from the web, from the service. I think it's good.
Yeah, it's good. Fantastic.
It could be there.
It looks nice. So while it's while your computer's chugging along there.
Oh, there we go. So it will run in windowed mode inside of Windows, which is pretty cool. And to uninstall it, you just right-click remove. I mean, they really made that unique. Apparently, it doesn't like the service layer. Oh, but it does. That's another thing. It does fail with style. It does have custom airplanes. Pretty cool.
One of the things I'm seeing, and this goes back to splitting the domain outside of your implementation, right? So you guys have a lot of logic inside Silverlight. If you were to have a web application, or a native application, or a Silverlight application, what we're seeing now is CEOs want to know how their business is doing. And the easiest way for us to do it is to implement a phone application, which until now is really good on web. Now the guys at Invoke have been doing a lot of Titanium, which is native conversions. Make a little website they can pull up on an iPhone or whatever phone that they have. With Windows phones, a lot of our clients are wondering what their options are for having a Silverlight smaller applications. It just gives the CEO some basic reporting ability. Yeah. With what you guys have right here, right? You'd have to copy the logic, move the logic, separate it out. If you had a domain that was separate, that was just regular C# stuff that had a service interface, then you write a smaller UI, you put a new graph on it, you call the same service call, and you're done. Then your serverless app takes a week and 2 guys, right? Rather than having to extract everything, break the previous application during your refactoring, having to write a bunch more unit tests, and having to split them out. Start off split. And write unit tests to enforce that division.
All right, any other comments, suggestions, or questions? I'd like to hear Robert Shorter. I don't know. You know, he's here. I want to hear one comment from Robert. Come on, Robert. Give me one.
Good job.
So you don't care about Scott?
No, Scott.
All right.
Yes. We were
Invoke.
going to implement that, and it's kind of out of our scope. But this is still the beta version. Well, I'll find it.
Okay, any more questions? All right, thank you.